Hey everyone, welcome to Beginnings, the show that asks, where do creative people come from? My name is Andy. I'm the host of the show and a writer and performer based in Los Angeles, California. How are you all doing? It seems like we are further descending into a viral nightmare. Hey, here in Los Angeles, we're now back where New York was like a month or two ago. You wearing your masks? Naomi and I are still sitting indoors in quarantine, going insane. What is this, day 105 of quarantine? Hey, this episode, very good talk with Dan Levy, who is a stand-up and TV writer, showrunner. It was recorded, I've been holding these episodes that I recorded right before the quarantine. I've been hoarding them, keeping them in the attic, waiting to release them. There's only 2 left that I recorded. This one was recorded right before. This is the Monday, and Dan came over, and we were like, do we shake hands? We did not. And you hear us kind of joking a little bit about everyone's reactions to the virus, because this is the Monday right before. If you remember, Wednesday the 11th of March was when shit started to get real here. And this was the 9th of March, and we were like, you just wash your hands a little more. Little did we know we were about to descend into a paradigm-shifting event. Anyway, if you don't know who Dan is, why don't I read you his bio right now? Originally from Stamford, Connecticut, stand-up Dan Levy has been performing comedy since he was 9 years old, and while in college performed stand-up as much as possible. This led to him winning Funniest College Comedian in America at the 2001 Aspen U.S. Comedy Arts Festival, which jump-started his career. He's hosted shows on MTV, has his own Comedy Central Presents special, and has written for numerous shows, including Whitney, Mulaney, and The Goldbergs. This all culminated in the creation of his own show, Indebted, based on his relationship with his parents, which is now streaming on Hulu, features former guest Adam Pally, also writing for it, former guest Annie Mebane. We talk about it a little bit on this episode, but Annie took me to the pilot taping, or a run-through of the pilot taping. And it's incredible to see a sitcom taped live. Something a home audience never gets to see is the charisma exuding off of these actors. They were so, like, Adam and Steven Weber, Fran Drescher, like, just all of them, you could just feel how charismatic they were in the room. It's incredible. But we talk, I would say, conservatively, we talk about Judaism for most of this, because we had somewhat similar but actually very different childhoods growing up, Dan and myself, and I kind of use myself, as usual on the show, as a mirror to try to see what my guests are like. Interesting career, interesting person. By the way, if this is your first time listening to Beginnings, thank you for checking out the show. You can get all the episodes on Spotify, or if you want to download them, at beginnings.libsyn.com. I've been doing this show for over 10 years. I've talked to hundreds of musicians and TV writers, authors, actors, stand-ups. If you're interested in this, because Dan is a TV writer and you want to check out other episodes with TV writers, Damon Lindelof has been on the show. Amy Aniobi from Two Dope Queens and plenty of other TV shows. Cord Jefferson, who wrote on Watchmen, has been on the show. So check out those episodes. If you want to subscribe to the show, you can do that on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google. I'm on Twitter and Instagram, even though both of those are now a nightmare as well, reflecting the nightmare at the heart of our culture. But every once in a while, there's something fun. At Andy Beckerman on both of those. And amazing episodes coming up. Mac McCaughan from Superchunk. Ben Passmore, wonderful comics artist who does a lot of work on The Nib. and a bunch of other great people. So stay tuned. Josh Radner from How I Met Your Mother. So stay tuned for those. But for now, let's talk to Dan. I couldn't find a lot about you online. Connecticut. That's about it.
Yeah.
That was my opening volley, as I was thinking, because I was trying to think. Also,
are we recording now? Is this started?
Yeah, this is on.
Okay.
I mean, we can cut out whatever is uninteresting at this point.
Love it.
Of the discussion. But
what's the policy with podcasting during the coronavirus outbreak? Are you changing the foam microphones?
No, there's a spray.
There is.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
cool.
I stole a spray from our. Now when I do a show with iHeartRadio, and so, which is the most commercial thing, and so I'm like, oh well, they can just I can steal the spray from them.
Yeah, absolutely, because that might be the lamest coronavirus story.
Death.
Would be like, the death would be, and he contracted the virus from podcasting in Los Angeles.
Yeah, that's on one of those things. That's a death that would be on one of those like kind of Darwin Award kind of things.
Yeah, it would be.
Okay, good. I'm waking up. Words are coming to me.
Yeah, we're doing it.
Yeah, this is happening. Also, Jewish. I was thinking, Jewish. Are you observant at all? Did you grow up observant?
I grew up conservative, but like I wasn't. But I wasn't really, if that makes sense. Like we went to a conservative temple, but it's the kind of thing. I got bar mitzvahed. We did all the holidays, but I got kicked out of Hebrew school for throwing stink bombs. Hey,
I got kicked out of Hebrew school too.
What'd you do?
Every week I would just make jokes in religious school, and I would get kicked out, and I would be forced to write an essay on whatever the closest holiday is, while everyone else was doing religious school stuff.
Oh, wow.
And also, obviously you're friends with Adam. I know Adam got kicked out.
Yeah, Adam got kicked out. I only associate with people who've been kicked out of Hebrew school. Yeah, my thing was a little bit. I was always just being like I was annoying. I was so annoying. I was obsessed with comedy and sketch comedy and Living Color and stand up and like whoopee could I was obsessed with like just so much comedy in my life. I'd like pull my pants down like an annoying class clown, I guess is what I would be. But in Hebrew school, I really would let loose because I didn't give a fuck.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, that's the thing. That was the one place where I knew I was terrified. I was just thinking about this the other day. I had to take traffic school. Nay, when I went to Solvang in October, so I put off this stuff for a very long time. I got a speeding ticket on the way up. And
were you drunk?
No.
Okay, good.
No. How dare you impugn me on my own show?
Well, I was thinking, I'm trying to figure out why you had to go driving school. I thought maybe you were drunk and Solvang.
No. Oh, no. If you get at any point on your license, I was like, I guess 15 or 20 miles above the speed limit.
Yeah.
20 miles. Let's be honest. And to avoid getting a point on your license, every 2 years you can take traffic school. It's terribly boring. It reminded me of normal school. But you could do it online. You just have to read stuff.
Right.
Also, you can apparently cheat. I did not know this until after I had already taken the final exam. Anyway, but it reminded me of how boring school was, but how much of myself I invested in regular school because I was terrified of doing badly and then not getting into a good college and my future being ruined.
Yes.
And that specter hung over my entire childhood. But religious school, I knew didn't count on my permanent record.
Yeah.
So I was just like, fuck this. As long as
live your life. Yeah. I mean, I went to the carnival, some church carnival.
I thought you were going to say Purim carnival.
No, I was at the Purim carnival yesterday.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. And then I went and got some stink bombs and I dropped them. And I remember this lovely girl, Brooke Gomberg, who's great. She came out in the hallway and smelled the stink bombs and went, ah, and she went to the office. And that was one of the reasons we got in so much trouble because they're like, and Brooke Gomberg is nauseous. And we're like, we're friends with her. She's always nauseous.
Well, yeah, she's Jewish. Yeah. Is that a thing? Is that a thing you have been able to avoid in adulthood? The Jewish stomach?
Yeah, you know what I gotta say, I've been lucky. I'm I guess I'm neurotic, a hypochondriac to a degree, but I always feel like, and I think I've said this on other podcasts, but I know my body very well. So if something is, people like my friends might say I'm a hypochondriac, but I sort of know when something is off. So luckily I haven't had any really stomach issues. It's been more just like weird ailments. Like I had a hip hike where my lower back was shifting upwards and I needed to be in physical therapy for a long time. And then most recently, I think because of the show and stress and a small injury, I got frozen shoulder, which is something that most like elderly overweight women get, but I got it. And it's basically a tightening of the shoulder capsule. But I knew something was off, and I was going to physical. I hurt myself just at the gym almost a year ago, and then I kind of ignored it. And then I went to a doctor, and then he's like, I think it's a labrum tear. I got an MRI, all this kind of stuff. It was like in the shoulder, and then I got a cortisone shot, and he's like, you'll be fine. And I was kind of fine. And then I went to physical therapy, and then they're like, well, don't work out, don't do anything. And then I basically, started making this show that's takes a lot of your time and so much stress, right? And then I kind of stopped going to physical therapy and just stopped like working out and stopped moving. And I wasn't moving that much anyways because I was sitting a lot. And basically, without moving my shoulder that was slightly injured, it froze. And I couldn't like lift. I mean, now I'm doing really well. You can see like this. People at home can't see, but my arm is moving all the way up past my head. But,
I'm witnessing it.
Yeah, but there was towards the our last week of production, like I could just like go like this, and I was in so much pain, but I just ignored it.
His arm is halfway up.
Halfway up. Yeah.
But wait, here's a question.
Yes.
There's a bunch of stuff I want to go back to, but are you? I mean, you've been a TV writer for a long time.
Yeah.
Are you comfortable? Are you show running your own show?
Yeah.
Okay. This is the thing that I've, since moving out here, a lot of the machinery of entertainment has been apparent to me. Like I moved here about 2.5 years ago, extremely naive, even though I've been doing this since 2013, really.
Yeah.
And just like this is I can make my dreams come true here. And then I'm like, oh no, this is a business first. And I got to see the machinery of business up front, the gears, instead of the pretty outside of the clock.
Yeah.
Is this the metaphor?
Yeah, sure.
What else has gears?
What do you mean? Rollerblades?
I'm just trying to think of anything. I'm like, the clock is too obvious a metaphor.
Oh, yeah. I'm
trying to think of something else that has gears. But the point is, are you comfortable with the managerial aspects? That's the thing that's so interesting to me, is that you're a writer, and then suddenly you're thrust into a managerial.
Oh yeah, it's crazy. I mean,
role.
for me it was really interesting because I, did stand up only. Like I never had a job. So I went to Emerson. I was doing stand up. I won some contests, and I basically graduated. Left school, I graduated early and I was just on a college tour. So I was just sort of like a working stand-up since I was like 18, 19 years old. So I toured and did all of that stuff. And then I was like hosting MTV shit. And I was like,
It's almost like the UK. Like in the UK, you can win a contest, or Australia, the Commonwealth. You can win a contest early, like Josh Thomas, if you know him, who has a show on Freeform now.
Okay,
but he won a stand-up contest when he was 17, and then he just did that.
Yeah, it was crazy. I won the HBO Funniest College Comedian in 2001, and then it was in Aspen. It was this really amazing experience, and then I came to LA when I was like a sophomore and got all my representation, and then was back in Boston in college and would come out, I did like a premium blend. I did all that stuff like, basically while I was finishing college, and it was so exciting. And then I got all these like booking agents, and then, when you're a 19-year-old, 20-year-old comedian and you perform at a college, it's amazing because I'm performing for my peers, where now I go to a college and I'm like, anyone have children? And it's like terrible. But, that so many years ago was like so relatable, and I would just like do so well at the college market. And now they're
just screaming at you to do the floss on stage.
I don't even know what that is.
What do people do?
I can't compete. Everyone's so sincere.
Talk about your polycule. What are kids doing?
What are they doing? And then, so anyways, then I came out, and then I always love like producing stuff and making stuff. So, during that sort of when people, I feel like a 100-year-old man, but when people started making like digital shorts and all that kind of stuff, there was Comedy Central and
Right.
Crack all the time. They all started like, you basically started pitching them things and you get like web series. So then I basically went from like hosting and auditioning and all that kind of stuff to sort of like writing these little shorts. And then that is essentially what got me into like writing scripts. And I wrote like a pilot, and then I just got hired on Whitney's sitcom because we were friends. So I came onto her show as a stand-up, as like a I was still on tour basically when I was on her show, and then I was just like hired as like her funny friend, and that was kind of what I did for a few years. Just like came in as the joke guy, and then years later, and then ended up on the Goldbergs as. I think I was like came on the show as like a producer, and then really started like writing and that sort of thing. But my point is that I went from like being a stand-up, transitioned into like a writer on sitcoms, and then when you get your own show, you become like a showrunner. So I never was a full like boss like that before.
Right. You never even had like a day job where you had managerial kind of experience.
I never. The only office I was ever in was the writer's room. So to go so that was a weird transition. Like my first transition from like being on the road and hanging out and like, all that hosting stuff to basically being in an office. I remember being like, oh, now I get office politics because like you don't like this person here and they work in this part of the office, so you try to avoid them. Like I never knew any of that kind of stuff. So,
but I mean, how do you personally, figure out how to, because you're doing this on the fly. It's not like you get to, it's not like NBC is like, hey, take this managerial training program or something like that.
What's frustrating is that WGA is a showrunners program, and I applied to it and I was like, hey, I have a show I have a pilot, I want to do the showrunners program, and they're like, sorry, we're full. And I was like, but my show's getting picked up. Okay. Anyway, so
because you're in charge of $1 million budget, or I mean, obviously more, but like
yeah. So you're in charge of, and but for me, like I've always been a really good like people person. Like I love sort of dealing with a lot of that. So that stuff came easy to me, just like managing the people. But there's still like so many people coming to you. Like you kind of realize that like when you're a writer on a sitcom and you have your showrunner and they're your boss, it's so easy to be like, oh, they're all crazy. Like, why are they freaking out at us? Like we're living our life. But like the truth is, when you're the showrunner, like you are thinking about the show 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can't help but think about it because it's like that's what you have to do.
Right.
And you're getting emails from everyone, people coming to you being like, hey, like the writers will be like, hey, I have a wedding Thursday. Is that cool if I leave next Thursday for 2 days? And I'm like, yeah, that's fine. Well, yeah, I sure. Like that's not like a problem of people still knocking your door. Hey, could you pick the puppy for Tuesday? Hey, a quick question. Fran Drescher has a question about the script. Will you go to set right now? Okay, come back from set. Hey, the network has a question about the story that you want to pitch for next week. Okay, no problem. Hey, now the studio wants to go over the script notes, and you're like, it's just crazy. It doesn't stop, but it's also very exciting. And our show is a multicam, so then it all led up to this big tape night.
Right.
So it was really it was more intense than working on like a single cam like the Goldbergs or whatever, because every day we were rewriting the script completely for the most part. So every night you're there to finish it, and then next morning we watch a rehearsal, the next morning we watch a rehearsal, and then Friday's the show. It's almost like, when you're doing a multicam, it's very similar to like, when you working on SNL or something.
Yeah. And he brought me to the run through. I don't know if you remember me.
Yeah, you were there. You were in the writer's room.
She brought me to the run room, the run through, and then I tentatively went with her to the writer's room.
Yeah, but cool.
It's amazing to watch. It's the first time I ever saw a multicam. It's incredible to see like Steven Weber. Like the charisma that exudes off him.
Yeah.
Like to go and to see, it's like a play. It's like watching a play.
Yeah.
And I never understood that before. It was the same thing like when I went and saw like SNL.
Yeah,
and I'm
exactly.
Like, oh, I never got this. I never like understood. I'm like at home laughing at like Dana Carvey doing.
Yeah. But you forget, it's so similar because I've been to SNL a few times, and like it's the kind of thing where when you're there, you're like, oh yeah, like these people are also like, they are just live performers, and they are like on, and they're nervous, and they just want to crush, and that's like the energy of making this show too.
Yeah, it's incredible to like, oh, okay, so a multicam or SNL or anything, you're bottling that energy.
Yeah,
and I never really understood that before. Like it's like again, this is like a coming out here is like this huge education. Like what these things are that I'm writing.
Yeah.
But
and that's why multicam actors, like, you have to be so good.
Yeah.
And, you know, and if you're not, like, you stand out. And that's why, like, a lot of times during pilots and stuff, you know, people will, you know, get fired or, you know, recast immediately because it's really, you just have to be a really, really good actor.
Right.
To pull it off.
So where, like, okay, you said you were a people person.
Yeah.
Were you as a child, as a teenager, were you a people person?
Yeah, I always had tons of friends. Like most of my friends in middle school, I was friends with like all girls. I always loved like talking on the phone and talking to people and talking things out. Like I'm a big talker. Like, so I was always around a lot of people, and I always, you know, in middle school, like from middle school through high school, I was in a comedy troupe, and that was sort of like my family, the Half Pint Players in Stamford, Connecticut. And that was a big part of like my whole adolescence was being a part of this group, and then also drama club, all that kind of stuff. So I was always surrounded by a lot of outgoing people.
But I mean, in your family, were you like that? Or are your parents, siblings outgoing?
Yeah, I think we all are. Yeah, we're all pretty like outgoing, loud Jewish people.
Like what? I mean, okay, one thing I want to go back to. You said you called yourself annoying. Were you like self-aware about? I was in this. I feel a kind of like kinship in the same way. Like I was annoying. I was very self-aware. Like I would get too hyper. I would like get too into like making jokes or like goofing around. Too. I wasn't like a class clown, but I definitely would like goof around in class. I would make jokes in class.
Yeah, like my favorite thing to do was to go in Kinko's and take my pants off. Like that's annoying.
Like how old were you? That's also
like 15.
Now we're on the edge of
like I like it would be like a, you know, like pranks. Like I was obsessed with pranks and you know, hitting camera stuff and like that, like, you know, Tom Green. Like I loved all that.
Okay. Was it Tom? Because I loved specifically Freddie Got Fingered. Tom, like to me, like there's a couple things that are a little foundational to me. I think Freddie Got Fingered is one of them.
Right. Not
so much a show though, but like was that a something that like got in your head?
Yeah, like,
or was it like Punked or you know?
Punked I was already in LA, you know, like auditioning for Punked, but like, yeah, all of that stuff, all the Tom Green stuff. I was like in high school, I think, when that was on. I just loved that. I thought that was so funny, you know. And so when I say I was annoying, like at the time I wasn't. Like I think everyone thought I was funny, but looking back, I'm like, I must have been out of control annoying. And like even now when you sometimes go, if I'm at the Improv or something, every once in a while there's like, you know, a young like a 15-year-old performer, you know, and you see a kid go on stage and perform, and like I know like I did that, and you think it's like so exciting, you think you're so funny, but obviously that kid is like.
Right.
You look back and you're like, oh man, what was I thinking?
So it was like precociousness in a way. Because I was thinking like when I was like I was like maybe too self-aware when I was a kid. And I was just like, oh, am I being like, I would get too hyper and I'd be like, oh, am I being too weird? Like I would like get in my head. And I would be too aware of like I would be too aware, I was going to say, of what other people were thinking, but really I was too aware of what I thought other people were thinking. And I would see myself from what I thought their eyes were seeing. And
I look back and I realized like I was so confident. Like I was so confident and like not self-aware. Like even like when I first early started performing, like in stand-up, I would wear a blue velvet jacket, and I thought it was amazing. Like I never thought to myself like, why am I wearing a blue velvet jacket? I don't know anyone else in comedy who would do this, but I was like, this is great. And I feel like growing up, I didn't really have a lot of like self-awareness, which I think actually helped my confidence.
Right.
Because I was sort of like, this is great. I'm like, we always talk about like my buddy AJ, who lives out here, who was in the Half Pint Players with me. He was always like 3 years older than all of us. And when he was a senior in high school, he made comments being like, I mean, we're doing improv for, like, our audience is a bunch of 11-year-olds. And I'm like, dude, we are the kings of Stanford. What are you talking about? Like I didn't never like that world of like doing improv games in high school I thought was amazing. And looking back now, probably, you know, maybe it wasn't as cool as I thought it was, but it didn't matter because in my mind, like the circle that I was in, like we were crushing life.
Well, I mean, when you say cool, like, were you in your school? Like, where were you in terms of popularity?
I mean, we were popular. Like,
it was.
Yeah,
I mean,
totally.
It wasn't like when I think of, someone like, someone doing improv. No one did it. There was no comedy in my school in Pennsylvania. I think about like, in college, like it wasn't cool to do improv. I was in a indie rock band, and I was at the radio station, and I did very much look down my nose at the school improv night, Friday nights improv at the Cathedral of Learning.
Right.
So it's interesting that it's a different kind of thing. In your high school, like it wasn't, you weren't an outcast, right? So that's probably where your confidence, or some of it. I mean,
for sure. And look, I don't know. I don't know if like the kids on the soccer team like all talked about us. I mean, like those fucking guys, those fucking improv, like what's wrong with them? Like maybe they did, but didn't get to us. We like would hang flyers up all around the school, and like our improv shows would be packed. It was a small little theater, but it was very fun.
I mean, what is Stamford like in general when you're growing up there? I know it only as like, I think, what did your parents do for a living?
My dad is an as seen on TV salesman, just like on the TV show. He sells as seen on TV products, like the Magic Bullet was a big product of his, and non-stick pans, all that kind of stuff. He's got what some people would say a fake sitcom job, but it's like totally real. And then my mom worked in early education for like a very long time.
Wait, how did your dad get into that? Is this, I mean,
in sales? He's just been in sales forever and just sort of moved on. He moved into it basically.
When does your family come over from, I'm assuming, Europe, like every other Jew?
Oh, like, well, my mom's dad was from Russia.
Okay,
but my dad, my grandparents were born in America.
So how far back do you go then here?
Oh, I only like a generation. Like, I think, yeah, right.
Like, okay. I'm wondering.
Like my grandpa was born in Russia. My grandma was born in Poland. Those are my mom's parents, and then my dad's parents, they were born in America.
Okay.
And then their parents were from Hungary.
Okay, that's where. Yeah. So that's my parents. My grandparents are Hungary and Austria and Poland in that area, and they come over like early 1900s, somewhere around there,
somewhere around there too. Yeah,
because I think about these generational things a lot, and like you and I guess, are technically third generation here, right?
Yeah,
first or second generation, I think.
I think second. I mean, I don't know, because my mom, I don't know.
Because I think about this a lot. I think a lot about Judaism and class, and like, what class do you think? Like, what I was trying to
we were like middle class.
Middle class. Stanford is kind of like, I think about like, don't like Wall Street people live there? Isn't it like a
no? I mean, what it
fancier
is
place?
Southern Connecticut is fancy. So there's Greenwich. And that's where a lot of Wall Street,
right?
Greenwich is like it's like, I think it's one of the wealthiest places in America, Greenwich. And then there's New Canaan, where like David Letterman lived, And then Darien is also a really wealthy area. And I think parts of Stanford are wealthy. There's like a really beautiful like beach oceanfront property in Japan in Stanford, but for the most part, it's like a upper middle class thing. We grew up middle class.
Yeah, because it's interesting. Like, my mom, English teacher. My dad worked in sales. He was like vice president of sales at some like small computer wholesale thing, I think. Right. This is what I've noticed on the show. Whenever I say a fact about my parents or grandparents, I then talk to my parents about it, and they're like, "No, that's not true." So
yeah, if my mom listens, she's gonna call me like, "You're wrong about all this information."
So let's put a big old asterisk at the end of that. But so similar backgrounds, and then was it just winning that competition that you're like, "Oh, well, I'm just gonna go do this"? Was there any kind of existential choice involved in this stuff, or was it just like, I've talked to a lot of people who like on the show who something early on happens to them and then they just go off in that direction. Oh, yeah, there was never like a like existential choice. Oh, this is what I want to do.
Oh yeah, no, when I was 9, I saw 8 and Evening of the Improv, and that was it. Like, I've only wanted to do this.
Yeah.
that was it. Like it was never like going to the Comedy Arts Festival in 2001. That was just like part of it. That had nothing to do with like how it was. I was already like making this happen. So since I was like 9, I knew this is all I wanted to do.
But there was never anything from your parents that were like, well, you should like they never were very direct with me, but I knew they wanted me to be a lawyer or a doctor. When I originally went to college, I was going to be a physicist. And they were, I think, fine with that because it was a doctor. But I think they wanted traditional second-generation Jewish son doctor, like all their friends.
Yeah,
children.
like my parents, not at all. Like my dad came to LA like in the late 70s to try to like do, try to be in Hollywood, and then just quickly went back to the East Coast. So they were always supportive. Like they always wanted me to do this. Like they were, they always supported it. And my dad would drive me into the city all the time to do comedy shows. I would take their car when I was like doing, on the road, just like all over upstate New York and stuff. They've always been like, they've always been supportive of it. The only thing they wanted me to do was go to college, because there was definitely a point in high school when I was like, I don't want to go to college. I want to move to New York, and I just wanted to like get into it right away and do everything. And they just really wanted me to go to college. So I did.
Yeah. I mean, I'm fascinated with people like you because like I think a lot about Paul F. Tompkins, who started doing stand-up when he was like 16 and 17 and then just went and did that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, what would have happened if I had I'm not bad mouthing my parents at all. That's a smart move for them to want a child who is a doctor or a lawyer. Of course,
right? Yeah.
So this is not on them at all. But like, it's on me for not having to be like, oh, I also wanted to do this for a long time, and I was just like, it was always in my head like, oh, I can't.
Yeah.
How did you think you could? Was it just your dad having gone out to Hollywood and seen what this was, like the reality of this? Again, like I said earlier, I'm like, I was up to like moving out here, I didn't really understand the reality of this, and I've been like writing professionally for like 5 years already.
Yeah, I think I just had this, this confidence that this is all I wanted to do. I was very young performing, and I was getting like a good reaction, like doing really well. So I just felt like it was going to happen, and I just went for it.
Do you think that's what it was? It was like this feedback cycle of like positive reinforcement that kind of like buoyed you?
Yeah, I think so. And then when things would just not happen, and especially just specifically in stand-up, like the rejection and all that shit is so intense. So it would just like hit me, and then I'd come back stronger. It was just like, and that's what I think it was a combination of the confidence and then just getting like just destroyed and coming back, and just having these, I have so many moments of driving the car, getting those phone calls, being like, it's not gonna happen. You're like, motherfucker, and that just happens a lot. And that's the kind of thing like we were talking about before you even started here, where it's like, what do you do when this thing doesn't happen? It's like, you just do it again.
Right.
You don't hold on to anything. You have to like keep on pushing yourself forward. And that's really hard to do.
Yeah.
And that is but it's the only other option.
Right. It's also like, I'm too old to do anything else at this point.
Yeah.
I had another life. I was a professor, and then I'm like, oh, I think I actually have the confidence to actually do the thing I want to do.
Yeah,
since
exactly.
I was a kid. I'm gonna go do that, and now there's no going back. So yeah, it is like, well, I guess I have to put food in the mouths of my dogs and cats. And,
yeah, exactly. You have to do it.
But I guess here's the thing. Like, I'm also trying to figure out. Like you said, you grew up conservative. I said you when you first got here, you're like, how are you? Like a normal human does, and I said good, and then I like looked inside for a second, and I was like, oh. Yeah, I'm actually good. Like, what a weird feeling. Because growing up Jewish, I was always waiting for the other shoe to drop. It's not like, I've had distant relatives that died in the Holocaust. It wasn't like it was an immediate family kind of thing. But like, from early on, just like the like even in religious school, just like Purim is coming up, like learning about like, Oh yeah, no. In every age that we've existed, people have wanted to commit genocide upon us.
Every holiday, we're celebrating someone trying to kill us.
Yeah.
With delicious food.
Yeah, here, have a vodka.
Yeah,
let that sop up the nausea from feeling panic. Right.
Yeah. Haman tried to murder us. Have a Humintashen.
It got in my head, right? And I think that like became a kind of world view for me in general, and that like I'm always waiting for, well, okay, things are going well. When are people going to be like shoving you? And I've also watched too many like even I was just watching Hunters, in which the Amazon show about Nazi hunters, but like they show parts of the Holocaust where they're like shoving Jews onto the street, like Nazis are shoving Jews onto the street and like smashing their stuff and shooting them, and I'm like, that imagery has been in my head since I was a child. And I'm like, okay, things are good. So when is someone going to like notice a mezuzah on my door and, come for me? But
I don't think like that.
You don't think like that.
I don't.
Right.
I don't. I mean, yeah. I just, I don't know what to say. My response is, like, I'm not like an end of the world. People are coming to get us. Like, I'm aware there's lots of anti-Semitism. I know that, people, a lot of people don't like Jews. A lot of people don't like a lot of people, but I'm not going to like, what am I going to do? Even with this coronavirus thing, it's like people are freaking out. I'm like, what are we supposed to do?
Right.
Like, I don't know. I just went to Hawaii last week.
Yeah.
I don't know what the hell's going on.
Yeah.
And it just seems like the hysteria is scarier than the actual flu.
Right. There's nothing like you can. I wash my hands more. It's also weird to like find out that people aren't washing their hands. I'm like,
that's
I wash
the
my hands
thing.
Whenever I come in from the outside or like go to eat somewhere. Why are you guys not doing that already?
Yeah, my father-in-law is a virologist and he's retired, but he like sent us a text. Like he flew through South Korea like 2 weeks ago, and he was basically like, wash your hands, be careful what you do, and that's pretty much it. Don't touch live birds.
Yeah.
Like that was like the takeaway. So, I mean, it's here, it's real, but I just don't know like what the point is to like freak out and put on gloves and face. People were like driving on Ventura Boulevard with face masks on.
Look, there's plenty of weird things about the city that we can.
Yeah.
But like, are your parents confident people? Like, do you get some of this from them?
Oh yeah. I think that they're just pretty confident and funny, and they've always been sort of extroverted and stuff. Like I feel like my dad is like probably more quiet now. Just I feel like that's what happens as you get older.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But like, was he, when you were growing up? You said as seen on TV, just like Stephen Weber's character.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And as seen on TV, salesman. He's not actually going out and like going to places and selling it. Is he? Question mark?
Yeah. My dad's been like, it started off just in sales like decades ago. But now, for the past like 20 years, he's works for this company and that's as seen on TV products. So he travels the country and basically like showing them his products, and he has people, work under him, whatever. And they go there and they say like, hey, Walmart, hey, Ralph's, we have these new pans. Do you want to bring them in? And then he goes and sells them.
So he's had to, you have to be, it's like a performance to sell something.
Yeah, it's a performance, and also the road. It's actually, his life is very similar to like a stand-up comic, because he's just like traveled the country for basically his entire life, pitching people and getting them on board and then going home. It's still like, it's just exhausting. He's on flights all the time, but it's made him an expert flyer. So he's got 1 trillion airline miles, which he'll never give to anyone. That's my trust fund, just my dad's airline miles.
So it's interesting. I never like to say that there's like a one-to-one kind of thing. I don't think there's any I don't think our lives are linear, right?
Yeah.
That like, well, this happened in my youth, now I'm like this. But there are certain things that like a foundation, that build a foundation for who you are as a person.
Yeah.
And I think that's interesting that seems like a very good foundation for being a stand-up. Like there is to see that in your father. Does that make sense? Is that?
Yeah. But to probably be honest, like I didn't realize it was probably the foundation, but I wasn't really aware that he was even doing that until I was older. I think that, but that being in my blood, and who
Yeah.
I am, I
Right.
think is definitely helpful.
I mean, what's your mom like?
My mom is like ridiculous. My mom is like Fran Drescher on the show. She's just like very funny, always talking, always having information, always call me with things. I always call her. I talk to her like every day. And she's just like she's like a really good friend, but also just like a ridiculous person and very funny.
Well, okay. Let me ask this. Because what is that relationship like? I have a relationship with my parents that is fine, good, but I wouldn't call us friends. And as an adult, I've been thinking a lot. I've been talking about this in therapy for years now about I try to have like an adult relationship with them. I still feel like a child. I don't feel like we are on the same plane in any way. I still feel in some way, even though I am, and maybe because I don't have kids, and maybe that's I don't know if that was maybe the thing for you that like put you into a more friendly kind of place or peer kind of place?
I mean, I wouldn't say, yeah. I mean, I feel like, yeah, you just get to a certain point where you like look at them more like people than like your parents. I mean, they're still like my ridiculous parents, but I just like, just talk to them, I mean, I wouldn't say we talk to them like we're like, like how I talk to my buddy Steve, but I talk to them all the time. Yeah. And they're just sort of, they're baby boomers. They're still like, they're ridiculous. I don't really know what to say. But my mom has always been like on the show, like someone who like loves me and, loves talking about me, loves saying what's going on. She's very excited about my life.
Like when I think of standard Jewish, that to me is quote unquote standard Jewish trademark symbol at the end of the phrase.
Yes.
Yeah. But you guys didn't grow up. Are they religious at all? Or
my mom isn't. My dad is. My dad got religious when his parents and when his father died, and then he just kind of became more religious. And then his mom died. My grandma died. So then I feel like he just kind of kept it going, and now I would say he's pretty religious, to the point where it's like, come on, really? You have to leave Saturday morning to go to temple? Like we want to go to brunch.
Okay, so yeah, no.
But my mom is not. But traditionally, it's really important to us, So
yeah,
we do all the traditions. We have all the seders and the light and the candles and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
but we don't. I didn't grow up having like Shabbat dinner every night at all.
We ate
bagels. That was pretty much as Jewish as our meals got.
Like we grew up. My parents are religious. I guess there's a distinction I'm trying to make between like someone who feels faith and someone who is religious. I know it seems almost the same thing, but like I grew up religious in the sense we did have Shabbos every Friday, and we went to temple, and I went to Hebrew school and all this kind of stuff. But I don't think I had faith. I don't think I ever felt I don't think I felt any kind of deeper connection to something bigger, whatever that bigger thing is.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you had that even if you weren't very religious, was there any kind of faith or any kind of feeling of faith in your family? You grew up conservative. You said you were bar mitzvahed, so.
Yeah, I mean, no. I feel like for me, that's what I love. I love being Jewish because I love the traditions, but I feel like the faith and the praying and all that kind of stuff, this wasn't really a real thing to me personally, but
it was boring to me.
Yeah, just, yeah. All that stuff just for me wasn't that exciting, but I love like the traditions of it, you know, and that's what matters to me the most. That's what I want. That's why my son is going to get bar mitzvah, not because like I love the faith, but just because I feel like it's what you do.
I find there's moral significance in the traditions.
Yes.
Like to me, the moral project of Judaism is what's really important, and that's backed up by the traditions.
Yes.
Like tzedakah and acts of love and kindness. I don't know why the Hebrew is escaping me right now, but like the being a good person part is backed up by the traditions. Yeah. And I think they're part and parcel of each other. You can't have one without the other. And that's why I find importance in like fasting at Yom Kippur and that.
Me too. It's like that for me, I do that I've done that every single year since I'm 13.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's just part of like my tradition of living.
So but you got kicked out still. But like this is the thing where I'm trying to like unravel some of the stuff because I do feel a lot of resonance with the way you grew up.
Yeah.
Even though my parents were more passive, more quiet than it seems like your parents were. Yeah. More outgoing. And and
I got in trouble a lot too. Like my dad would scream at us all the time, like that, it was all that kind of stuff.
Like what kind of trouble? Like what? I mean, why were you getting in trouble?
Oh, just because like getting hit at Hebrew school. One time I drove my dad's car to the garage, like insane. I was, then I, just all that kind of like, adolescent misbehavior.
No, I don't, because I was frightened to death.
You were frightened
of, again, permanent record, fuck up my future.
Oh yeah. No,
it was a constant, there were some little pranks. Like one time I was going, to Albright College in Reading, Pennsylvania, to talk to a psychologist because I was doing a Skinner box experiment for the science fair that year. And I had this idea in my head. My friend Kirk would always quote unquote prank me, and that he would hit me in the arm, and like that was somehow a prank. And so I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to get back at Kirk. I'm going to have my friend Kevin tell him that I fell down the stairs and had to go to the hospital. And really, I'm at Albright College talking to the psychologist. And then it backfired and it got around the school that somehow I had like fallen down the stairs and broken my legs, and I was in the hospital. And when I told I didn't find that out until later. And I was like in the car, my dad had picked me up, and I was like chuckling, and he's like, what is it? He's like, and I told him the prank. He's like, are you insane? What if this gets back to your mom? Because this was the days before cell phones. What if this gets back to your mom before we get home and she starts panicking? And then do you ever have those like moments of clarity where like suddenly everything is like revealed
like,
to you?
What have I
and you're
done?
like, oh fuck. So that was the one like prank that I did, and it backfired spectacularly. And so it like made me nauseous.
Really funny.
And I was like, oh, I hate this nauseous feeling. I never want to feel it again. So I just stayed away from that shit.
Yeah.
And but like you
yeah, no, I kept doing it, like Halloween, shaving cream, toilet paper, throwing eggs, all that kind of stuff. And then as I got older, I got into like, coinciding with my like, intense stand-up like improv world. I started like, rollerblading, like aggressive skating and downtown, like all that sort of stuff, doing like flips and all that shit. So then
what? No, sorry, what?
Yeah, so I went through like a skater phase too, where I was basically like, would cut class and rollerblade, like go on half pipes, all that stuff.
Okay. But like there was no, I almost said no fear, as if that's
what it was, baby.
But like there was no like, okay. So I'm like going back to this thing in my life. I'm projecting my own personality to see what matches up with you, which is apparently very little. But like if you were no fear, I was like all fear. Again, this like kind of like Holocaust paranoia again in Pennsylvania away from. Here's the other thing. I don't wonder if this is a little different from growing up in Connecticut, but like the Ku Klux Klan would have like weekly marches.
Yeah, it's very different than Connecticut.
In Reading up through the 70s. So before I was born, but still this is like what my parents are like living through there.
Right.
And I wonder if that contributes to their paranoia.
No, we didn't have the Ku Klux Klan. We had squirrels.
Squirrels, all right. And they didn't have little robes on or anything like that. No, it was just regular squirrels.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, so all fear here, there's no atmosphere of fear in Stanford at all.
No, I mean, I'm sure there was.
But I mean, for you specifically, growing up.
No. I mean, I was... trying to back on this rollerblading thing, I really like in those moments, I really had no fear. I was like wearing the Jinko pants and I had the chain wallet, and I went down 72 stairs backwards and we 360. And it wasn't until I think my junior year that I went head first through a half pipe and like broke through it. And my friends thought I died on the half pipe.
Like head through like a cartoon,
like a literal, literally just like that. It was just like. And it wasn't a perfectly made half pipe. It was like just like hammered in the backyard. Sure. And then people were like, oh no, I think I remember my friend goes, oh shit, is Dan dead? And I was like, guys, I'm okay. And that day forward, I was scared to rollerblade. And then in terms of like my tricks, but yeah.
I mean, I wanted to skateboard. I got into like Black Flag and like LA hardcore music from the early 80s, and I wanted to skateboard, and my parents wouldn't let me because they thought I would like break something.
He's got to wear those bone pads. I wore bone pads, blasted Operation IV, and just went to town.
I had a mid-20s crisis, and started my friend. And also he was in a relationship that like a 10-year relationship that broke up around the same time. And so we, and I lived in Philly, and we got skateboards finally in my mid-20s, and would go to the supermarket after, it was closed at around 9, and we would just skate in circles around because that's what
I did that 2 years ago over a hiatus. I was like, you know what I want to do? Like, I'm going to just skateboard. And because I got my son to skateboarding, and then he quickly, of course, was like, I don't like this. It's too hot. But there was a skateboarding coach, this guy, I forget his name, Gio. And I basically called Gio and did like 3 skateboarding lessons with him. And I was getting pretty good. And then he stopped, and I stopped, but it was really fun. But then it's too dangerous because I'll definitely get hurt. But it was very fun. I got a longboard. I was cruising.
Well, I mean, when you were young, what was it about pranks that you enjoyed? Like, what was it that that made you want to do things like that, or even like? I see it's not the same thing, but like rollerblading, it's the same kind.
It's the same world.
Thrill,
it's that
right?
jackass world.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, there's just the thrill. I just love fucking people. I don't know. It's just fun for me. I still love doing it.
Sure.
Yeah, it's just very fun. Like, you know, Dan Mintz, who I work with.
Oh yeah.
I've been I still prank him like to this day. We're like almost 40. but yeah, I don't know. I just like it.
But
I enjoy it. Like I love watching like Ali G and all that stuff. Like those sort of movies like really get me going.
I mean, your parents, but they encouraged you to kind of goof around.
They didn't encourage me, but they weren't really that against it. You know, I think I didn't really ever fuck with them. You know, like usually like Bam Margera, who like puts a crocodile in his parents' kitchen. Like I never like fuck with my parents. It was all just like my friends, and they were. I think before I got into like doing improv and stuff, and it was in like when I was in 4th grade, I had like low self-esteem, and I had like problems like figuring out what to do with all my energy. So my mom found this class for me, and it sort of changed everything. So I think like once I got into this thing, it was just like helped me so much that I think they're like, all right, this is gonna make you want to prank more. I guess it's fine.
So like it kind of like it gave you. I'm putting this together maybe wrong, but you tell me. Either structure or it let you channel some kind of like amorphous feelings into...
channeling all my like energy into this sort of performance, and it was so fun.
I didn't realize it was like 4th grade. It was that early on.
Yeah.
So like pretty early on, I mean, what was your life like before that? I mean, can you remember?
I barely remember. I don't really remember. I think I was just like, I was so young.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, I was probably, you know, in kindergarten. I have no idea. Like 1st grade. I think 3rd grade I had a really good teacher. I think what happened was I had really great teachers. And then I think in 4th grade I had like a teacher that was just like mean and wasn't like embracing my energy. And that's what it was like. I think 3rd grade and 4th grade. Or I forget. I don't even know. I know I had a great.
It was 3rd
teacher.
for me. It was kind of like a teacher that like I was goofy and loud and fun and weird. And I think 3rd grade was like the teacher that wasn't having it.
Yeah, I had a good teacher for 3rd grade, Miss K. She had a lot of birds. She was great. But then my 4th grade teacher, I think, wasn't great. I forget her name. But and then that was sort of when I think I just wasn't able to like know what to do with my energy, and then she wasn't embracing it, and then I was sort of bummed, and then I found improv, and here we are.
I think we're lucky in the sense that like we existed before it was common to just drug your kid if you were like that.
Probably, yeah.
Like Adderall, I think we're around the same age, but Adderall didn't come around until like what, late 90s really?
Yeah, I mean there was Ritalin. My mom, like I remember my mom telling me a story that like after a sleepover one time, like a mom called my mom and was like, he needs to be on Ritalin. My mom was like, he's perfect.
Oh, yeah. My parents. Okay, so I'm starting to see the differences. Your mom going, he's perfect. My mom being, if someone had called my parents to say that, my mom would have been like, what did you do?
Right. Yeah. I mean, my mom asked me what I did. And I think what we did is we like built a giant tent around a very expensive grand piano.
Yeah. I did stuff like that too.
Yeah.
It's all coming into focus. This kind of like.
It's all happening.
No, but like your parents were very encouraging. I mean, my parents were encouraging to an extent.
Right.
But there was also just a like kind of like they didn't understand my exuberance, let's say.
Yeah.
And my energy, and we were just on different. Like anytime there was like a comedy thing, like when I was a kid, MTV had repeats of early SNL on, and those were points of connection. Or like you mentioned, A Living Color. My dad and I would sit and watch A Living Color on Sunday nights together.
Yeah.
That was it was just my dad's 70th birthday, and I made him I photoshopped him as Homie the Clown. Like there's a Homie
so
Don't
great.
Play That t-shirt.
Yeah.
And so I made him like a specific like a special t-shirt for that, because that was like a thing that we used to do. So there were like these points of connection over comedy things, specifically though, like old like stuff that they grew up with, like SNL. Like they're from New York, and so like they were, they went and saw SNL when it first.
Yeah, like my dad was obsessed with David Letterman. I remember I used to go to bed at night, like listening to him laugh at the top 10 lists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, I was obsessed with. I didn't even understand them, but I got all those like they made books of David Letterman's top 10 list. I don't know if you remember them at all.
Yeah, of course.
But I got them when I was a kid, even though I barely understood what they meant.
What a great idea!
It was
a great
always
segment.
It was like there was so much. I don't know if this is what your childhood was like, but there's so much comedy stuff I was getting that I didn't understand it at all.
Oh, yeah.
But like I enjoyed it. Like specifically, I think a lot about like I'm only learning about some of like Dennis Miller's references on like when he was doing Weekend Update.
Yeah.
It's stuck in my head, but Adnan Khashoggi is a reference he made.
Yeah.
And then I learned in the last couple of years that was an arms dealer in the 80s. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like I had no idea. But there was all this like kind of like.
Oh, I remember doing sketch comedy. Like we used to go to like the Treehouse Comedy Club, and one time we went and did like a sketch show there, and like it was a Tuesday or a Thursday in Norwalk, Connecticut, at a comic club. Like not the perfect venue. And this other guy, Johnny Rizzo, who I actually took a comedy class from, like an old school like 80s comic, performed that night. And he was just fucking filthy. And we went on after him and like danced and did whatever the fuck we were doing. But he was literally just on stage being like, and her fucking pussy. And like our parents were in the crowd and we're like, what are we experiencing right now? But it was great.
Yeah. So there, like for me, there were like these little points of connection with my parents. But did you have more points of? It seems like they accepted you as you were.
Oh yeah, I mean my bar mitzvah theme was stand up comedy. So like every table was a comedy club. I think Brett Gelman's was David Letterman was his theme. I feel like there were some people who just knew what they were gonna do, and their parents embraced it right away.
Interesting. It's so like it's such a foreign experience to me. Again, I don't have a bad I'm the more like as I'm talking, I'm like it's not like I have a bad relationship with my parents at all.
No,
but just like one where it was they had like a future in mind for me.
Yeah,
I didn't fulfill it.
Yeah,
and I think there's always that tension there where it's like what they wanted and what I actually am are so different. And they're even like when I was
into it now that you're here and you're doing stuff.
You would think. They don't like. I don't think they understand it at all. And I'm wondering.
One thing I will say that my parents are so great about is like they've been with me for so long now that even though some things are just like still confusing and especially like now having a show on TV and like what does that mean and when will if it gets picked up and all that kind of stuff like is obviously foreign to them, and even some things are even foreign to me, like being at this point, but. They always were sort of aware of how things go. So that's been good. It wasn't a lot of like, like your parents probably don't think like, oh, you have a podcast, you just did this Comedy Central thing. Like they might not realize how great those sort of things are in terms of being in show business, where I feel like if I sell a pilot, like my parents like, no, that's good. Like they understand.
Yeah, they don't
pilot.
understand.
Like
only when I was on, I was, I worked on Pete Holmes' talk show, and so I showed up on TV a couple times in that when they were, writers sometimes get to do stuff on the screen, and that's like the high watermark for them if you actually appear on TV, and everything else they don't understand.
Right.
Like anytime Naomi is like on a TV show or like when she has a stand-up special or something like that, that's where that's when they freak out.
Right. I guess that makes sense, but I think they'll learn.
Well,
maybe
we'll see. But I want your dad, like, did your dad want to be an actor? Like, you said he came out here, like, what did he want to do specifically? Did he have something in mind?
No, I didn't have anything specifically. I think he just sort of wanted to be in show business. Like I think he would he had some sort of like assistant type job, like on a lot for like a minute. He then auditioned for something, I think in Pasadena. Like I still don't know exactly what he did for this time he was here, but I think he just wanted to get in, but like he jokes that he wishes he knew me when he moved out to LA. But he, I think he just wanted to get in. And then, especially in I think it was 79 or something, or maybe it was even 80 when he was here, talking about parents not understanding what you're doing in LA. Like he's like was from New York. His parents were in New York. They all were in sales. Everyone in the family was doing the same thing. And they're sort of like, you got to come back and do this. Like, what have you been thinking? So then he came back.
So
he just got married. So that's why they would never do that to me.
Yeah. So it sounds like your grandparents are the kind of where my parents are. Yeah. Like in terms of like, totally. Again, I'm trying to like suss out this like, because there's so many complex kinds of like, it's like Judaism and immigrant kind of culture that kind of aligns to put us on certain paths specifically.
Yeah.
And it's tough, I think, especially if you don't grow up in a showbiz family, to know, that this is possible in the first place. Yeah. And I wonder if like your dad having like tried it, come out here, seen what it was, gave you a window into this world in a way that other people may not have had. And like, specifically me, as I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, maybe, but it wasn't even something that I was even aware of. It wasn't something he like talked about a lot. It was something we kind of put together as I kind of got older. And then he always had his one friend, Steve, who lived out here, who he met, who was like my one connection when I moved to LA. And he was not very helpful. But yeah. But I think for him, it was more so that since he tried it and his parents were not supportive, like I don't think he would ever not be supportive.
So like he's like, oh, I don't want to be that kind of parent.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
Did you know your grandparents?
Kind of. They were in Florida, so I didn't really have a real relationship with them.
So I'm wondering about like your parents' relationship with their parents a little bit. And if that maybe influenced their own parenting style. I mean, it seemed like a little bit in this case that influenced. Yeah,
maybe. I don't know. It was, it was such a different time. Like my parents and my wife's parents, like they're at our place like all the time, and even though they live in Florida and Connecticut, like they're always around. Where my grandparents, even though they were only in Florida, I was in Connecticut, they just were never around. Like we would see them once a year when we went to Florida, and that was pretty much it. There wasn't like FaceTime and there was none of that.
Right.
So it was not really a thing. And then, my grandparents died when I was like, well, my grandma lived a little bit longer, but they pretty much weren't around by the time I came out to LA and everything.
Yeah. Most of my grandparents had already died by the time I was born. And my grandmother lived until I was about 12. She died a little bit before my bar mitzvah. And so
they were all at my bar mitzvah. They were all at a comedy club table.
So, I mean, because like it's interesting. Was there a point? So it was almost like you were on a kind of path. You're like, I've loved this since I was in fourth grade, since I discovered this in fourth grade.
Yeah.
Was there a moment like in your adulthood where you like looked inside? Again, I don't think these things are like moments, but more like a process of like coming to realize a thing. Was there a moment where you realize where you realize this is what I want to do? Does that make sense? Like there's stuff that I wanted to do since I was a kid. Like, I mean this, but like, I don't think I made like a real existential decision about that stuff until I was in my late 20s.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it was just, it just sort of happened, organically. Like organically, but I was working so hard, to like get it to happen that, I think when I was just performing and, I remember there was, I wouldn't study abroad because I had to perform, like there was those sort of things. Like
yes.
I made these weird sacrifices that like I regretted a little bit because I didn't really like, I definitely didn't have a normal college experience. I was performing at a comedy club in Boston every single night I was in college. And if I wasn't, then I was, performing with my Emerson comedy troupe. So there wasn't a lot of like I had fun and everything, but it definitely wasn't like, I didn't party. I wasn't like living it up in my 20s. I was just sort of like very determined and very focused.
We're right at the end of the show. But like, I think about like Dana Gould or like, again, other people who started like very young.
Yeah.
How do you become, or how do you learn how to talk to other people? Right. If you are launched into this comedy world very early on.
Yeah.
And again, I'm thinking of Dana Gould talking about like, he's like, I went to college for a year and I didn't learn how to like really relate to people or talk to people because I missed so much of the college experience because I was performing. He was on the road at 17, opening up for other comics.
It was similar. And I remember when I got kind of bad advice because when I first went to the comic clubs, like, they would like, the comics would bring me on stage and make fun of how young I was, like, or like what I was wearing and all that kind of stuff. Like I wasn't, there were some comics early on in Boston, like John Fish, Gary Goldman, who were super nice to me and thought I was funny. And we're awesome. Dan Mintz too. We started like at the same time and we're good friends, but a lot, but some people were not like super friendly. And like, also I was 18 at like a bar, just waiting around to perform. I'd go back to my dorm room and then I'd come back 2 hours later. And I got one advice from this manager who was like, they don't want to be friends with you, so don't be friends with them. And that was like that was bad advice. So I really spent like the first like 6 months, year in Boston, like performing and leaving. And that was like a big thing I would do is I would just perform and leave. So but because I was also in college and I had these like younger college friends who were my buddies, it wasn't like I felt like I needed like this big social comedy, stand-up comedy world because I was getting that in college with like my friends who were like my age. So I would just leave. And that was wrong. I should have just sort of hung out a little bit. But a lot of comedy, as you know, is like there's a lot of dark people, a lot of fucked up things happen. I'm sure you too have known a lot of people who've died. It's like, tragic. It's totally tragic. And that's something you do not prepare for. It's just sort of like all the tragedy and deaths that will be around you when you enter this sort of comedy world. Yeah. But so I sort of like avoided a lot of that early on. And then I kind of found like more of my peer group when I was a little bit older. That like Mulaney, there were like Aziz, there was a lot of these people, who were, and Mintz too, where we just basically, and then we came to LA, it was like Whitney, and we just kind of like became like that was sort of like my generation of comics, and then those became more of like my like true comedy friends who I still talk to,
So it's interesting too. Like you also didn't have like an alt scene in Boston.
Yeah.
Like when I went to New York, I started in UCB and I was doing like basically like Brooklyn alt kind of stuff. Yeah. When I was performing, and
there was the comedy studio, but I was never. That was another thing too. I was never trying to like get into a scene. I was just trying to perform, and then I slowly realized I'm like, oh yeah, there are all different scenes. But I was basically like bouncing around. I'd be at the comedy studio with Eugene Merman, then I'd go to the Comic Connection, open up with Adam Ferrara,
Yeah.
And then when I came to New York, to me it was all about the comedy clubs, So like I got passed at the Comedy Cellar when I was, came from Boston one time, when I was like 20. And then Lucian passed me at the comic strip. And then I was performing at stand-up New York. And I would come and do the UCB shows, I think Crash Test when it was there. And then that other show, forget what it was. But I would do them when I was in town. But for the most part, I was just like performing wherever I could perform.
So, okay. So you weren't just, it wasn't like Dana Gould where he like had no connections to other humans and then had to learn later in his 20s how to like connect with human beings. Yeah. You had this, and you also, I think maybe the difference is too, is that your parent, you had this foundation with your parents.
Yeah.
That let you be a human being.
It was, but I do feel like I was so like young and trying to leave where I probably should have like hung out more, and just like been around a little bit, as opposed to sort of always just darting out of the place because I was like,
I'm just more wondering about like, how do you learn to be a human being? Like you're like the person you are when you perform is obviously an extension of you.
Yeah.
But it's also like there's I've seen out here like it's you can confuse yourself for that and turn into that. And that becomes who persona. You are as a person. Your persona becomes you. Right. And whatever you are either is buried or just like dissipates in some way.
Yeah.
And I guess the thing that I was like trying to figure out was like, how did you avoid becoming a wraith?
Yeah. Well, I think for me also, like I've always been, I always had like a really like solid circle of friends. Like one of my best friends is from growing up. I've always, I've been in a relationship for a very long time and married for almost 10 years. So like that really like that stabilization of like that normality of like being married at 29 and then having like a family now. Like I've always sort of like, that's really important. I feel like in show business to sort of be grounded in a way and not only be obsessed with what you're working on.
Yeah. And that's why I was trying to figure out like if this is like been something that you have been into since fourth grade, right? How does that not become you as a person? Because you do have family and friends and
I mean, I think part of it, you can't help it. I mean, it is part of you. It's like you're still that's who you are. Like you want to do this forever and that's just part of who you are. But I think like having like a really good circle of friends and just like this like foundation of people is what's going to keep you okay.
All right. How do you feel?
I feel good.
We're now we're at the end. I think I figured out the thing I was curious about going in. How do you feel being on the other side of that process? Bad, good?
I think pretty good. Well, how does this compare to other things?
I never know what the guest is going to, because I'm not just asking like a question about like what was it like working on the Goldbergs, right?
Yeah.
I'm not just asking like that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
So I never know how someone's going to be like, people are resistant.
Oh yeah, no, I like it. It's nice. It kind of felt like a therapy session, a Jewish therapy session.
Yeah, well, I think everything I do is going to have that adjective in front of it. Jewish therapy session, Jewish day at the pool, Jewish
dog and cat owner,
Jewish taking out the trash. But thank you so much for coming over.
Of course, this is great. I love this place.
Thank you. It's took a while to find here in Los Angeles, a place that we felt safe. So
love it.
And we'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, oh, 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 bye.